Sarah Martinez walked onto the luxurious private jet wearing her simple uniform, ready to serve the wealthy passengers on their transatlantic flight. She had no idea that her calm professionalism would be met with shocking humiliation from the arrogant airline executive who had chartered the plane. When Marcus Blackwell saw her humble appearance and assumed she was beneath his standards, he made a decision that would change everything. He publicly berated her, questioned her qualifications, and ultimately had her removed from the aircraft in front of dozens of witnesses. What Marcus didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just any stewardess. Her husband was waiting just 1 hour away, and when he discovered what had happened to his beloved wife, his response would leave everyone speechless and transform the entire aviation industry forever. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. Thank you. Sarah Martinez adjusted the collar of her crisp navy uniform as she stepped through the gleaming doorway of the most luxurious private jet she had ever seen. At 32 years old, she had spent over a decade serving passengers in the skies. But nothing in her extensive experience had prepared her for the opulence that surrounded her now. The Blackwell Aviation charter jet gleamed with polished marble surfaces, genuine leather seats that cost more than most people's cars, and crystal fixtures that caught the morning sunlight streaming through oversized windows. Sarah carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from years of professional service. Her movements precise and purposeful, despite the intimidating grandeur of her surroundings. She wore no makeup beyond a touch of lip balm, her dark hair pulled back in a simple bun secured with a plain black elastic band. Her uniform, while impeccably clean and pressed, was the standard issue attire provided by the staffing agency. Practical and functional, rather than designer or luxurious. The comfortable black flats on her feet had walked thousands of miles through airplane aisles, and though they showed signs of wear, they were polished to a respectable shine. Sarah believed deeply that true professionalism came from competence and dedication, not from expensive appearances or flashy accessories. As she began her pre-flight preparations, Sarah moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, checking every detail with the methodical precision that had earned her commendations from countless airlines over the years. She inspected each seat for cleanliness, ensured that every safety feature was functioning properly, and arranged the amenities with careful attention to presentation. The champagne flutes were positioned at exact intervals, the imported chocolates arranged in perfect rows, and the cashmere blankets folded with military precision. Her approach to service was rooted in genuine care for passenger comfort and safety, values instilled in her during her early training and reinforced through years of experience serving everyone from budget travelers to celebrities. Sarah took pride in treating every passenger with equal respect and attention. Whether they were flying coach on a domestic route or first class to exotic destinations, she understood that her role was to ensure not just comfort, but peace of mind, helping passengers feel secure and cared for during their journey. As she continued her preparations, Sarah mentally reviewed the passenger manifest and flight details, familiarizing herself with dietary restrictions, special requests, and any potential concerns. Her dedication to excellence meant anticipating needs before they arose and handling challenges with grace and professionalism. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cabin as Sarah made her final adjustments, unaware that her simple appearance and humble demeanor would soon be tested in ways she never could have imagined, and that her quiet professionalism would become the center of a confrontation that would change everything. Marcus Blackwell strode across the private tarmac, with the commanding presence of a man who owned everything he surveyed, his handmade Italian leather shoes clicking against the asphalt with rhythmic precision that announced his arrival to anyone within earshot. At 45, he had built Blackwell Aviation from a small charter service into one of the most exclusive private jet companies in the world, catering to billionaires, celebrities, and heads of state who demanded nothing but absolute perfection in every aspect of their travel experience. His charcoal gray Armani suit, tailored to his exact measurements by the same London craftsman who dressed European royalty, fit his athletic frame like a second skin, while his burgundy silk tie, worth more than most people earned in a month, was knotted with mathematical precision. The platinum Rolex Submariner on his wrist caught the morning light as he gestured to his assistant, its weight a constant reminder of his success and status in a world where every detail mattered. Marcus believed that excellence was not just about quality, but about perception. And he had built his empire on the understanding that wealthy clients paid premium prices not just for superior service, but for the assurance that they would be surrounded by nothing but the finest people, products, and experiences money could provide. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled with a product that cost more than most people spent on groceries, and his manicured hands bore the soft smoothness of someone who had never performed manual labor, each finger adorned with subtle but expensive accessories that spoke to his refined taste and substantial wealth. As he approached his flagship aircraft with 3 potential investors from Dubai, Marcus mentally cataloged every element of the experience he was about to provide, knowing that these men controlled oil fortunes worth billions and expected their every interaction to reflect their elevated status in the global hierarchy of power and influence. The conversation flowed easily as they discussed expansion opportunities in the Middle East, with Marcus painting vivid pictures of exclusive terminals, private lounges, and bespoke services that would cater to the most discerning clientele in the world. When Marcus first caught sight of Sarah through the aircraft window, his sharp businessman's eye immediately assessed her appearance with the same calculating precision he applied to every business decision, and what he saw caused his confident smile to falter slightly. Her simple uniform, practical shoes, and complete lack of the polished glamour he associated with high-end service struck him as jarringly out of place in his meticulously crafted world of luxury and exclusivity. In Marcus's mind, every employee was a reflection of his brand, and their appearance needed to communicate the same message of sophistication and premium quality that his clients expected from every aspect of their experience, from the champagne they drank to the uniforms worn by the staff who served them. And Sarah's humble presentation seemed to contradict everything he had worked to build. Marcus stepped into the luxurious cabin with his 3 distinguished guests trailing behind him, their conversation about multi-million-dollar investments immediately halting as his eyes locked onto Sarah, who was carefully arranging the final touches on the refreshment service with the same methodical precision she had maintained throughout her career. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Marcus studied her from head to toe, his expression shifting from surprise to barely concealed displeasure, while Sarah continued her preparations with professional focus, unaware that she had become the subject of intense scrutiny from the aircraft's owner. Marcus said, his voice carrying the sharp edge of authority mixed with confusion, causing Sarah to look up from her work with the same calm, attentive expression she had perfected through years of customer service. I wasn't aware that the staffing agency had made any last-minute substitutions to our carefully selected crew for this flight. His tone suggested that any deviation from his exact specifications was not just unwelcome but potentially unacceptable, while his guests exchanged glances that indicated they were beginning to sense tension in what should have been a seamless luxury experience. Sarah straightened to her full height, maintaining the poised professionalism that had served her well in countless challenging situations, and responded with the clear, respectful tone she used with all passengers, regardless of their status or attitude. Good morning, Mr. Blackwell. I'm Sarah Martinez from Premier Flight Services, and I've been assigned to ensure your comfort and safety during today's journey. I have over 10 years of experience in commercial and private aviation. Her credentials were impeccable, her training extensive, and her record spotless, but Marcus seemed less interested in her qualifications than in her appearance, his eyes continuing to assess her simple uniform and understated presentation with growing dissatisfaction. I specifically requested our premium staff for this flight, Marcus continued, his voice rising slightly as his frustration became more apparent to everyone in the cabin. Clients of this caliber expect a certain level of presentation and sophistication that reflects the exclusivity of our service. The 3 investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier enthusiasm for the business discussion dampened by the awkward confrontation unfolding before them, while Sarah maintained her composure, despite the increasingly personal nature of Marcus's criticism. I understand your expectations, sir, and I'm fully qualified to meet them, Sarah replied evenly, her voice steady despite the growing tension. My focus is always on providing exceptional service and ensuring passenger safety above all else." Her calm response seemed to irritate Marcus further, as though her refusal to be rattled by his criticism was somehow insubordinate, and his jaw tightened visibly as he struggled to maintain his professional facade in front of his important guests while dealing with what he perceived as a staffing problem that threatened to undermine the carefully orchestrated experience he had promised to deliver. Marcus's professional mask began to slip as his irritation transformed into something more openly hostile, his voice carrying across the cabin with the kind of authority that brooked no argument as he gestured dismissively toward Sarah's uniform. "This is exactly the kind of inconsistency that damages our reputation," he declared loud enough for everyone to hear, his words cutting through the refined atmosphere like a blade. "When clients pay premium prices for an exclusive experience, they expect staff who look the part, not someone who appears to have wandered in from a budget airline." The three investors exchanged increasingly uncomfortable glances, their earlier excitement about potential business partnerships now overshadowed by the awkward spectacle unfolding before them, while Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands clasped professionally in front of her, as she absorbed the public criticism with remarkable dignity. Her uniform, while simple, was immaculate and appropriate for her role. But Marcus continued his assessment with the ruthless precision of someone who had built his empire on attention to detail. "Standards matter in this business," he continued, his voice gaining momentum as he warmed to his theme. "Our clients don't just pay for transportation, they pay for an experience that reflects their status and success. And every element of that experience, including staff presentation, must meet the highest possible standards." Sarah's calm expression never wavered, though a slight tightening around her eyes was the only indication that his words were having any impact on her professional composure. The co-pilot, James Chen, watched nervously from the cockpit doorway, his 20-year aviation career having taught him to recognize when a situation was spiraling beyond normal passenger relations into something potentially damaging for everyone involved. Emma Rodriguez, a young flight attendant who had been quietly preparing beverages in the galley, stepped forward with the kind of courage that comes from witnessing genuine injustice, her voice trembling slightly but determined as she addressed her employer. "Mr. Blackwell, Sarah is one of the most experienced and professional flight attendants I've ever worked with," Emma said, her words carrying the weight of sincere conviction despite her obvious nervousness. "She's been nothing but thorough and dedicated in her preparations this morning." Marcus whipped around to face Emma with the swift intensity of a predator whose authority had been challenged, his eyes flashing with the kind of anger that comes from being contradicted in front of important clients. "I didn't ask for your opinion, Miss Rodriguez," he snapped, his voice dripping with condescension. "And I suggest you focus on your own responsibilities rather than defending staffing decisions that are clearly above your pay grade." The three investors shifted uncomfortably in their leather seats, their body language suggesting that Marcus's behavior was making them question not just the business opportunity, but the character of the man they were considering as a partner. Sarah placed a gentle, restraining hand on Emma's arm, her touch conveying both gratitude for the support and a silent request that the young woman not escalate the situation further, while her eyes remained fixed on Marcus with the kind of steady professionalism that seemed to irritate him even more than open defiance would have. Marcus's composure began deteriorating rapidly as Sarah's unwavering professionalism seemed to fuel his frustration rather than resolve it, his carefully cultivated business persona cracking under the pressure of what he perceived as insubordination from someone he considered beneath his standards. "I want to speak with your supervisor immediately," he demanded, pulling out his platinum-encased smartphone with sharp, aggressive movements that betrayed his growing agitation. "This level of staffing is completely unacceptable for a flight of this importance, and I intend to make sure that Premier Flight Services understands exactly how their poor judgment has compromised my business relationships." His voice carried the unmistakable threat of someone accustomed to wielding economic power as a weapon, each word carefully chosen to intimidate and establish dominance in a situation that was rapidly spinning beyond his control. Sarah maintained her professional stance despite the escalating hostility, her voice remaining steady and respectful as she responded to his demands with the kind of quiet dignity that comes from years of dealing with difficult passengers. Mr. Blackwell, I understand your concerns, but I am fully qualified for this assignment with current certifications in safety procedures, emergency protocols, and luxury service standards, she said. Her tone neither defensive nor apologetic, simply factual. My supervisor can certainly be contacted, but I believe you'll find that my credentials meet or exceed the requirements for this flight. Her calm recitation of facts seemed to infuriate Marcus further, as though her refusal to be intimidated by his threats was somehow a personal affront to his authority and status. The three investors watched this exchange with growing discomfort, their earlier enthusiasm for potential business partnerships now completely overshadowed by their host's increasingly erratic behavior toward his own staff. Abdullah al-Mansouri, the lead investor whose oil fortune had built cities, leaned forward slightly and spoke in accented but perfect English. Perhaps we should focus on our business discussion, he suggested diplomatically, his tone carrying the subtle weight of someone accustomed to diffusing tense situations in high-stakes negotiations, but Marcus was too far gone in his anger to recognize the diplomatic lifeline being offered. This is exactly the kind of attention to detail that separates successful businesses from mediocre ones. Marcus snapped, his professional veneer now completely abandoned, as his face flushed red with rage. Every aspect of the customer experience matters, and I will not allow substandard staff to undermine the reputation I've spent decades building. James Chen stepped forward from the cockpit, his captain's training compelling him to intervene before the situation escalated beyond salvage. Sir, we need to complete our pre-flight procedures, he said carefully, trying to redirect Marcus's attention away from the confrontation, but his words only seemed to remind Marcus that he was the ultimate authority on his own aircraft. Don't tell me what we need to do, Captain, Marcus replied with icy authority, his eyes never leaving Sarah as he continued his assault on her professionalism. What we need is staff who understand that working for Blackwell Aviation means representing the highest standards of excellence, not showing up looking like they belong on a budget carrier serving peanuts and soft drinks. Marcus's anger reached a boiling point as he turned his full attention to dismantling what he perceived as an unacceptable situation, his voice rising with each word as he addressed the entire cabin with the commanding presence of someone accustomed to absolute obedience from his employees. This woman is simply not the caliber of staff that belongs on a Blackwell Aviation aircraft, he declared, gesturing toward Sarah with obvious disdain. Our clients expect sophisticated, polished professionals who understand the level of service required in this exclusive environment, not someone who looks like she just stepped off a commuter flight from Des Moines. His words carried the sharp edge of someone who had built his empire on the belief that image was everything, and that any deviation from his exacting standards was a direct threat to the carefully constructed brand he had spent decades perfecting. Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands clasped professionally in front of her as she absorbed his verbal assault with a kind of dignity that seemed to infuriate him even more than direct confrontation would have. I demand her immediate replacement, Marcus continued, his voice gaining volume and intensity as he warmed to his theme. I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. I want someone on this aircraft who understands what it means to work for the most exclusive aviation company in the world. The three investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their body language suggesting that Marcus's behavior was becoming more concerning than any potential business opportunity could justify. Sarah took a deep breath before responding, her voice remaining calm and professional despite the increasingly hostile atmosphere that surrounded her. Mr. Blackwell, I understand your preferences, but federal aviation regulations require that all crew members complete specific pre-flight procedures and safety briefings, she explained with the patience of someone who had dealt with countless difficult situations throughout her career. Replacing crew members at this stage would require additional safety protocols and could significantly delay your departure time. Her knowledge of regulations and procedures was encyclopedic, gained through years of training and experience in both commercial and private aviation. But Marcus seemed less interested in facts than in asserting his dominance over what he perceived as an insubordinate employee. James Chen found himself caught in an impossible position, his professional obligations as captain requiring him to prioritize safety and regulatory compliance while his employment with Blackwell Aviation depended on maintaining his boss's satisfaction and approval. "Sir, Sarah is correct about the regulations," he said carefully, trying to balance his professional integrity with his job security. "Any crew changes at this point would require additional paperwork and safety procedures that could delay our departure by several hours." Marcus whirled around to face his captain with the kind of fury that comes from being contradicted by multiple employees in front of important clients. "Are you telling me that my own company's procedures are more important than client satisfaction?" he demanded, his voice dripping with the kind of menace that had intimidated countless employees over the years. "Because I can assure you that there are plenty of pilots who would be happy to prioritize what really matters in this business." Marcus positioned himself in the center of the luxurious cabin like a general addressing his troops, his expensive suit and commanding presence designed to intimidate as he prepared to deliver what he clearly intended as the final word in this escalating confrontation. "Miss Martinez, I'm going to give you one opportunity to leave this aircraft voluntarily with whatever dignity you have remaining," he announced, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to absolute compliance from anyone in his employ. "You can walk off now and save yourself the embarrassment of being escorted off by security, or you can continue this pointless resistance and face the professional consequences that will follow you for the rest of your career." His ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the refined atmosphere he had worked so hard to create for his distinguished guests. While Sarah stood perfectly still, absorbing his threats with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout the entire ordeal. Marcus turned to address the three investors directly, his tone shifting to the persuasive cadence he used in boardroom presentations as he attempted to frame his behavior as necessary business leadership. "Gentlemen, this is exactly the kind of situation that demonstrates why Blackwell Aviation has become the most exclusive private aviation company in the world," he said, gesturing expansively as though Sarah's presence was a teaching moment rather than a human being whose livelihood he was threatening. "We maintain the highest standards in every aspect of our operation because our clients deserve nothing less than perfection. And that means making difficult decisions when those standards are not met." The investors exchanged glances that suggested they were finding his explanation less convincing than he had hoped, their discomfort evident in their body language as they witnessed what appeared to be a disproportionate response to a staffing situation. Sarah took a deep breath, her voice steady and clear as she responded with the kind of quiet strength that comes from years of professional training and personal integrity. "Mr. Blackwell, I have a professional obligation to ensure the safety and comfort of all passengers on this flight," she said, her words carrying the weight of someone who took her responsibilities seriously. "Regardless of personal cost, I cannot and will not abandon those duties unless I am physically prevented from performing them." Her refusal to capitulate seemed to strike Marcus like a physical blow, his face flushing darker as he realized that his intimidation tactics were failing spectacularly in front of the very people he had hoped to impress. Captain Chen stepped forward, his aviation experience telling him that the situation was approaching a point of no return that could have serious consequences for everyone involved. "Sir, we have a schedule to maintain and safety protocols to follow," he said carefully, trying to find a diplomatic solution that would satisfy Marcus without compromising his professional obligations. "Perhaps we could discuss this matter privately after we complete our departure procedures." Marcus turned on his captain with the fury of someone whose authority had been challenged once too often, his voice rising to a level that made everyone in the cabin uncomfortable as the tension reached a breaking point that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed facade of luxury and exclusivity he had worked so hard to maintain. Marcus reached for his phone with the decisive movement of someone who had finally decided to end what he perceived as an intolerable challenge to his authority, his fingers moving swiftly across the screen as he dialed airport security with the same cold efficiency he brought to firing employees who failed to meet his exacting standards. "This is Marcus Blackwell of Blackwell Aviation requesting immediate security assistance on aircraft tail number November 77 Alpha Bravo." He spoke into the phone with crisp authority, his eyes never leaving Sarah as he delivered what he clearly intended as the final blow in their confrontation. "I need an unqualified crew member removed from my aircraft immediately for violating company standards and disrupting our departure schedule." The three investors watched in stunned silence as their potential business partner escalated a staffing disagreement into a security incident. Their earlier enthusiasm for the partnership now completely overshadowed by their growing discomfort with Marcus's increasingly erratic behavior. Within minutes, two uniformed security officers appeared at the aircraft door, their professional demeanor suggesting they were accustomed to handling delicate situations involving wealthy passengers and exclusive aviation services, though their expressions indicated they found this particular situation unusual even by their standards. The senior officer said to Sarah, his tone respectful but firm as he followed protocols for removing someone from a private aircraft, while Sarah maintained her composure with the same dignity she had shown throughout the entire ordeal. The walk through the cabin felt endless as Sarah moved slowly toward the exit. Every eye in the luxurious compartment focused on her with a mixture of curiosity, sympathy, and embarrassment for witnessing such an uncomfortable scene. While Marcus stood with his arms crossed, his expression showing satisfaction at finally asserting his dominance over the situation. Abdullah al-Mansuri rose from his seat as Sarah passed, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to speaking truth to power, regardless of the consequences. "This treatment is unnecessary and unprofessional," he said directly to Marcus, his accented English perfectly clear as he expressed his disapproval. "The young woman has conducted herself with dignity throughout this entire unfortunate incident." Emma Rodriguez stepped forward from the galley area, her voice trembling with emotion as she addressed her employer despite the obvious risk to her own job security. "Mr. Blackwell, this is wrong." "Sarah is one of the most professional and experienced flight attendants I've ever worked with," she said, her words carrying the weight of genuine conviction, even as she faced potential retaliation for her honesty. Sarah paused at the aircraft door and turned back to face the cabin one final time, her voice steady and professional as she delivered her parting words with the same grace she had maintained throughout the entire confrontation. "I want to thank you all for allowing me to serve you today. And I hope you have a safe and pleasant flight," she said, her dignity intact despite the humiliation she had endured. "It has been my privilege to work with such a dedicated crew, and I wish everyone the very best." With those words, Sarah Martinez walked off the aircraft with her head held high, leaving behind a cabin full of uncomfortable passengers and a crew struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Sarah settled into a worn plastic chair in the busy terminal, her hands folded calmly in her lap as she processed the surreal events that had just unfolded. The noise and bustle of travelers around her seeming distant and muted as she tried to make sense of what had happened to her professional reputation in the span of less than an hour. The humiliation stung more than she wanted to admit, not because of Marcus's cruel words or public dismissal, but because she knew that word of this incident would spread through the tight-knit aviation community where her reputation had been built through years of dedicated service and unwavering professionalism. She pulled out her phone with steady hands, scrolling through her contacts until she found the number she needed most, taking a deep breath before dialing the man who had been her anchor through every challenge and triumph of their 15-year marriage. "Hi, honey. It's me," she said when he answered, her voice carrying just the slightest tremor that betrayed the emotional toll of the morning's events. "I'm at the airport, and something happened that I need to tell you about." Meanwhile, aboard the luxurious aircraft, Marcus straightened his tie with visible satisfaction as he watched the security officers escort Sarah across the tarmac, his sense of vindication complete as he turned to address his guests with the confident smile of someone who believed he had just demonstrated decisive leadership under pressure. "Gentlemen, I apologize for that unfortunate interruption," he said, settling into his leather seat with the relaxed posture of someone who had successfully resolved a crisis. "This is exactly why Blackwell Aviation maintains such rigorous standards. We simply cannot allow our reputation to be compromised by inadequate personnel." The three investors exchanged glances that suggested they found his explanation less convincing than he had hoped, their body language indicating that they were still processing what they had witnessed and finding it difficult to reconcile with the professional image Marcus had projected during their earlier negotiations. Captain Chen moved through his pre-flight checklist with mechanical precision, his 20 years of aviation experience telling him that the uncomfortable atmosphere in the cabin was far from resolved. Despite Sarah's removal, while Emma Rodriguez retreated to the galley area where she whispered urgently to the remaining crew members about what they had just witnessed. "I can't believe he did that to her," Emma murmured to Mike Thompson, the senior flight attendant who had watched the entire confrontation unfold with growing discomfort. "Sarah has more experience and professionalism than half the crew members I've worked with. And he humiliated her in front of everyone like she was nothing." Mike nodded grimly. His own years in the service industry having taught him to recognize when management crossed the line from demanding excellence to abusing power, while the other crew members struggled to maintain their professional composure despite their shock at witnessing a colleague treated with such obvious disrespect and cruelty. The tension in the cabin was palpable as everyone tried to process what had happened. The luxurious surroundings feeling somehow tainted by the ugliness of the confrontation that had just taken place within them. The phone rang twice before a warm, familiar voice answered with the kind of gentle concern that comes from years of loving partnership, and Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders as she heard her husband's reassuring tone on the other end of the line. "Sarah, sweetheart, what's wrong?" he asked immediately. His ability to read the subtle nuances in her voice, honed by 15 years of marriage, during which he had learned to detect even the smallest signs of distress or uncertainty in the woman he adored above all else. His voice carried the calm strength that had attracted her to him from their very first meeting, a quality that had only deepened over the years as he had built his own remarkable career, while never failing to prioritize their relationship and her well-being above everything else in his demanding professional life. "It's nothing too serious, just a difficult passenger situation that got a bit out of hand," Sarah said, automatically minimizing the humiliation she had endured because she had always been reluctant to burden him with her problems, especially when she knew he was dealing with his own high-pressure responsibilities that required his complete focus and attention. She briefly described the morning's events in carefully neutral terms, editing out the most hurtful aspects of Marcus's behavior and focusing instead on the procedural aspects of the situation. But her husband had not built his extraordinary success by missing important details or accepting surface explanations when deeper issues were clearly at play. "Sarah, talk to me," he said, his voice taking on the slightly sharper edge that appeared whenever he sensed that someone he cared about was in distress. "What exactly happened? And don't try to protect me from the details, because I can hear in your voice that this was more than just a difficult passenger." His tone carried the kind of focused attention that had made him legendary in boardrooms around the world, the same laser-like concentration that he now directed toward understanding every nuance of what had happened to his beloved wife. As Sarah reluctantly provided more details about Marcus's public criticism of her appearance, his demands for her removal, and the humiliating escort from the aircraft, her husband's breathing became more controlled, a subtle sign that those who knew him well recognized as the calm before a storm of focused action. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, his voice now carrying the icy precision that had intimidated corporate executives and government officials across multiple continents. "This man publicly humiliated you, questioned your professionalism, and had you removed from an aircraft because he didn't approve of your appearance." The transformation in his tone was subtle but unmistakable, shifting from concerned husband to something far more formidable as he processed the full scope of what had been done to the woman he cherished above all else. "I'm coming to get you," he said with quiet finality. "Stay exactly where you are. And don't worry about anything else because this situation is about to be resolved in a way that Mr. Blackwell will never forget." 45 minutes after Sarah's phone call ended, the distinctive whine of powerful jet engines cut through the ambient noise of the busy airport as a sleek black aircraft descended toward the private aviation terminal with the kind of precision that spoke of an experienced flight crew operating under urgent instructions. The aircraft itself was a marvel of modern engineering and luxury, its pristine exterior gleaming in the afternoon sunlight as it touched down with barely a whisper on the exclusive runway, reserved for the most distinguished passengers and their high-priority flights. Airport ground control immediately recognized the tail number and felt their pulse quicken as they realized the significance of this unexpected arrival, their standard protocols shifting into high gear as they scrambled to accommodate someone whose presence commanded immediate attention and absolute discretion from every level of airport management. The black jet taxied with purposeful efficiency toward the premium terminal, its arrival triggering a flurry of activity among ground crews who moved with the kind of urgent precision normally reserved for heads of state or international dignitaries whose security requirements demanded flawless coordination and split-second timing. Within minutes of the aircraft coming to a complete stop, a convoy of black vehicles appeared on the tarmac, as if materialized from thin air, their tinted windows and subtle modifications, suggesting that this was no ordinary passenger pickup, but rather something that required the highest levels of security and protection. Airport security personnel began positioning themselves at strategic locations throughout the terminal, their radios crackling with coded communications as word spread through the facility that someone of extraordinary importance had just arrived without advance notice or fanfare. The mysterious passenger emerged from the aircraft with a kind of understated confidence that immediately commanded attention without requiring any dramatic gestures or obvious displays of wealth or power. His simple but impeccably tailored clothing and calm demeanor, suggesting someone accustomed to moving through the world with quiet authority rather than flashy demonstrations of status. Ground crews and airport officials who caught glimpses of him found themselves instinctively straightening their posture and improving their professional bearing, responding to an indefinable quality that marked him as someone whose approval mattered more than most people could possibly understand. The terminal manager received an urgent call from his superiors instructing him to provide whatever assistance might be required, though the specific details remained deliberately vague in the way that suggested this situation required discretion and flexibility rather than standard operating procedures. Security cameras throughout the facility began tracking the mysterious arrival's movement through the terminal, while airport officials gathered in small groups to discuss the implications of such an unscheduled but obviously significant visit to their facility. The atmosphere in the private terminal shifted perceptibly as staff members sensed that something momentous was about to unfold, their usual routine disrupted by the arrival of someone whose mere presence seemed to charge the air with anticipation and barely contained energy that suggested dramatic events were about to transpire. Sarah's husband moved through the private terminal with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, his appearance reflecting the same understated elegance that had drawn him to Sarah 15 years earlier when they first met at a charity fundraiser where both had been more interested in the cause than in impressing other attendees with expensive displays of wealth or status. His charcoal gray sweater was cashmere but bore no visible designer labels, his dark slacks were perfectly tailored but understated, and his leather shoes, while obviously expensive, were chosen for comfort and quality rather than ostentation or brand recognition. The only hint of his extraordinary success was a simple platinum wedding band and a vintage watch that discerning observers might recognize as worth more than most people's homes, though he wore both with the casual indifference of someone who had long ago stopped thinking about material possessions as measures of personal worth. Airport staff members began exchanging glances and whispered conversations as they tried to place his familiar features, their recognition growing slowly as they realized they were looking at someone whose face they had seen in business publications and news reports, though always in contexts that emphasized his accomplishments rather than his celebrity. Terminal manager Patricia Williams felt her breath catch as full recognition dawned. Her 20-year career in aviation having given her extensive experience with wealthy and powerful passengers, but never with someone of this particular caliber, whose presence at her facility represented a seismic shift in the importance of whatever situation was unfolding. She immediately reached for her radio to alert senior security personnel, her training telling her that when someone of this stature arrived unexpectedly, every aspect of terminal operations needed to be elevated to the highest possible standards of service and discretion. Other passengers in the exclusive terminal began taking notice as well, their conversations shifting from business calls and travel arrangements to hushed speculation about the identity of the distinguished man who moved through their midst with such quiet authority and obvious purpose. Ground crew members who had serviced countless private jets carrying celebrities, politicians, and business leaders found themselves stealing glances at someone whose reputation exceeded even their extensive experience with powerful passengers, while terminal security discreetly repositioned themselves to provide appropriate protection without being obvious about their movements. Sarah's husband approached the information desk with the same calm demeanor he brought to billion-dollar negotiations, his voice carrying the kind of respectful authority that immediately commanded attention while remaining perfectly polite and professional in tone. "Excuse me. I'm looking for my wife, Sarah Martinez," he said to the desk attendant. His words simple and direct, despite the gathering crowd of onlookers who were beginning to realize that something significant was happening in their normally routine environment. She was working on a Blackwell aviation flight that should have departed approximately an hour ago. But I believe there may have been some kind of incident that prevented the flight from proceeding as scheduled. The gathering storm was building quietly and methodically, though few people in the terminal yet understood the full magnitude of what was about to unfold when this man's investigation revealed the truth about what had happened to his beloved wife. Sarah's husband listened with increasing focus as the terminal desk attendant nervously explained that there had indeed been an incident involving a Blackwell aviation flight, her voice trembling slightly as she realized she was providing information to someone whose very presence seemed to command absolute attention from every airport official within earshot. His questions were precise and methodical, delivered in the same calm tone he used during corporate acquisitions worth billions of dollars, each inquiry designed to build a complete picture of the events that had led to his wife's humiliation without revealing the growing intensity of his emotional response to what he was learning. "I need to speak with anyone who witnessed the incident," he said with quiet authority, his request carrying the weight of someone accustomed to having his needs met immediately and without question. While airport security discreetly began gathering staff members who had been present during Sarah's removal from the aircraft, Emma Rodriguez was located within minutes. Her nervous energy evident as she was escorted to meet with someone whose reputation had reached even the lower levels of airport staff, though she had no idea why her testimony about Sarah's treatment was suddenly so critically important to terminal management. As Emma recounted the events with growing confidence, describing Sarah's professionalism and Marcus's increasingly hostile behavior, Sarah's husband absorbed every detail with the kind of focused attention that had made him legendary in boardrooms across multiple continents. His expression remained perfectly controlled throughout her account. But those who knew him well would have recognized the subtle signs of controlled fury building beneath his calm exterior, the slight tightening around his eyes, and the careful precision of his breathing that preceded his most decisive actions. Terminal security provided additional witness statements from ground crew members who had observed Sarah's escort from the aircraft, their accounts painting a picture of public humiliation that grew more disturbing with each added detail. While Sarah's husband maintained his composed demeanor despite learning that his beloved wife had been subjected to treatment that violated every principle of human dignity he held sacred. Airport officials began making urgent phone calls to their superiors as word spread through the facility about the identity of the man conducting this investigation, their growing understanding of the situation's implications causing a ripple effect of nervous energy throughout the terminal management structure. Meanwhile, air traffic control reported that Blackwell Aviation's flight had encountered what they described as a minor technical issue requiring an immediate return to the airport, though the nature of the problem remained deliberately vague in the way that suggested external pressure rather than genuine mechanical difficulties. The irony was not lost on anyone involved that Marcus Blackwell's flight was being forced to return to the same airport where he had just humiliated a crew member, though few people yet understood the connection between these seemingly unrelated events. As Sarah's husband completed his methodical investigation, his calm demeanor never wavering despite the mounting evidence of his wife's mistreatment, airport officials found themselves caught between their professional obligations and their growing realization that they were witnessing the prelude to something that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved in the morning's events. The first indication that something was seriously wrong came when Captain Chen received an urgent radio transmission from air traffic control, instructing him to alter course and return immediately to their departure airport due to what the controller described as mandatory maintenance inspection requirements that could not be delayed or postponed. Marcus looked up from his conversation with the three investors, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to genuine concern as he registered the captain's tense body language and the subtle change in the aircraft's flight path that indicated they were no longer proceeding toward their planned destination. "What's the problem, Captain?" Marcus demanded, his voice carrying the sharp edge of someone unaccustomed to having his carefully planned schedules disrupted by unexpected complications. While the three investors exchanged glances that suggested their earlier discomfort with his behavior, was now compounded by concern about potential safety issues with the aircraft itself. Captain Chen's response was carefully neutral, as he explained the air traffic control directive, though his 20 years of aviation experience told him that mandatory inspections were rarely ordered for aircraft that had passed their pre-flight checks less than 2 hours earlier, and the timing of this particular requirement struck him as suspiciously convenient, given the morning's earlier confrontation. The crew moved through the cabin with barely contained nervous energy as they prepared for an unscheduled landing, their professional training taking over despite their obvious confusion about why a perfectly functioning aircraft was being recalled to its point of origin without any apparent mechanical justification. Emma Rodriguez found herself stealing glances at Marcus as she secured the cabin for landing, her mind racing with questions about whether this unexpected return could somehow be connected to Sarah's humiliating removal from the flight, though the connection seemed impossible given the short time frame involved. Marcus's frustration mounted with each passing minute as he realized that his important business meeting would have to be postponed. His carefully orchestrated demonstration of Blackwell Aviation's superior service, now undermined by what appeared to be an inexplicable technical failure that threatened to damage his reputation with potential investors. "I want answers the moment we land," he announced to Captain Chen, his voice carrying the kind of menace that had intimidated countless employees over the years. "This company's reputation depends on reliability and precision, and I will not tolerate mechanical failures that could have been prevented with proper maintenance procedures." The three investors shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Marcus's anger began building toward another explosive outburst, their earlier enthusiasm for the business partnership now completely overshadowed by their growing concern about his temperament and judgment under pressure. Abdullah al-Mansouri leaned forward to address his host directly, his diplomatic training telling him that the situation required careful management to prevent further escalation. "These things happen in aviation," he said in his careful English, attempting to diffuse Marcus's growing rage. "The important thing is that safety protocols are being followed to ensure everyone's well-being." Marcus's response was a barely controlled snarl as he realized that his perfect day was rapidly deteriorating into a series of humiliating setbacks that threatened everything he had worked to accomplish with these critically important potential partners. Marcus strode down the aircraft stairs with the confident bearing of someone prepared to unleash his fury on whatever incompetent mechanics had dared to disrupt his carefully planned business presentation, his expensive shoes clicking against the metal steps, as he mentally rehearsed the scathing reprimand he intended to deliver to airport maintenance personnel who had obviously failed to properly service his aircraft before departure. The sight that greeted him on the tarmac was far more extensive than he had expected. With what appeared to be half the airport's senior management team assembled in a loose semicircle around the base of the aircraft stairs, their formal posture and serious expressions suggesting that this was no ordinary maintenance inspection but rather something that required high-level administrative attention. "I want to know exactly what kind of incompetence led to this embarrassing failure," Marcus announced loudly as he reached the bottom of the stairs, his voice carrying across the tarmac with the authority of someone accustomed to having his anger serve as an effective tool for motivating subordinates to better performance. "My aircraft passed all pre-flight inspections, and this delay has seriously compromised important business relationships that represent millions of dollars in potential revenue." Airport officials exchanged nervous glances as they realized that Marcus had completely misunderstood the nature of the situation, their body language suggesting that they were dealing with something far more serious than mechanical difficulties or routine maintenance procedures. Terminal manager Patricia Williams stepped forward with the kind of careful diplomacy that comes from years of managing delicate situations involving powerful passengers whose displeasure could have significant consequences for airport operations. "Mr. Blackwell, there's someone who needs to speak with you regarding an incident that occurred earlier this morning," she said, her voice carrying the measured tone of someone delivering potentially explosive information to a man whose temper was already running dangerously high from the unexpected flight interruption. Marcus's expression shifted from anger to confusion as he processed her words, his business-focused mind struggling to understand what kind of incident could possibly require his personal attention when he should be dealing with aircraft maintenance issues and rescheduling his disrupted meeting with potential investors. Through the terminal's floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus caught his first glimpse of a man standing calmly near the departure gates, his understated appearance and relaxed posture somehow commanding attention, despite the complete absence of any obvious displays of wealth or authority that Marcus typically associated with important business figures. The man's presence seemed to create a subtle ripple effect throughout the terminal, with airport staff members positioning themselves at respectful distances while maintaining clear sight lines to the waiting area where he stood. With the patient stillness of someone completely confident in his ability to handle whatever the situation was about to unfold. Other passengers in the terminal had begun to take notice as well. Their usual focus on travel schedules and business calls now shifted toward the growing sense that something significant was happening in their normally routine environment. While Marcus found himself walking toward the terminal with increasing uncertainty about what he was about to encounter, and why a simple maintenance issue had apparently escalated into something requiring personal intervention from airport management. The moment Marcus entered the terminal and saw Sarah sitting quietly in the waiting area, her simple uniform and dignified posture immediately recognizable, despite the earlier confrontation, his confident stride faltered as he began to understand that this situation was far more complex than any mechanical failure could possibly explain. His confusion deepened when he noticed the distinguished man standing beside her. His understated appearance and calm demeanor somehow familiar, though Marcus couldn't immediately place where he might have seen him before, until Patricia Williams stepped forward to make the introduction that would change everything. "Mr. Blackwell, I'd like you to meet Alexander Martinez, Chief Executive Officer of Martinez Global Industries," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone delivering information that would fundamentally alter the balance of power in the room. While Marcus felt his world shift beneath his feet as the implications of her words began to penetrate his consciousness, Alexander Martinez, the man whose business empire spanned 6 continents and whose personal wealth exceeded the gross domestic product of most small nations, the same Alexander Martinez whose name appeared on the Forbes billionaire list every year and whose corporate decisions influenced global markets and international trade policies, was standing in this airport terminal as the husband of the woman Marcus had publicly humiliated and removed from his aircraft less than 2 hours earlier. The color drained from Marcus's face with the speed of someone who had just realized that his entire career and everything he had built over 2 decades was now hanging by the thinnest possible thread, while airport officials watched in fascination as one of the most arrogant men they had ever encountered was reduced to speechless shock in a matter of seconds. Alexander's presence seemed to fill the terminal, despite his completely understated demeanor, his calm authority causing everyone within sight to unconsciously straighten their posture and improve their professional bearing, while Marcus stood frozen in place as his mind struggled to process the magnitude of his mistake and its potential consequences. Other passengers in the terminal began recognizing the famous billionaire's face from countless magazine covers and news reports, their whispered conversations, creating a growing buzz of excitement and anticipation as word spread that they were witnessing what appeared to be a confrontation between 2 of the most powerful men in the aviation industry. Alexander stepped forward with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable exercising authority in any situation, his voice carrying the quiet strength that had commanded respect in boardrooms around the world as he addressed Marcus directly for the first time. "Mr. Blackwell, I believe we need to discuss the treatment my wife received on your aircraft this morning," he said, his tone perfectly controlled, but carrying an undertone of steel that made everyone in the terminal understand that they were witnessing something that would have far-reaching consequences for everyone involved. Marcus tried to speak but found that his voice had completely deserted him, his usual confidence and commanding presence evaporating under the weight of Alexander's calm but unmistakably powerful attention, while the 3 investors who had followed him into the terminal exchanged looks of absolute horror as they realized that their potential business partner had just revealed himself to be catastrophically poor at judging people and situations. Alexander Martinez maintained his composure with the same iron discipline that had built his business empire as he began to speak, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone accustomed to having his words reshape entire industries and determine the fates of companies around the world. "My wife Sarah has dedicated 15 years of her life to ensuring passenger safety and comfort in aviation, earning commendations from airlines across 3 continents for her professionalism and expertise," he said, each word delivered with precise clarity that cut through the terminal's ambient noise like a blade. This morning, you publicly humiliated her, questioned her qualifications, and had her physically removed from your aircraft because you deemed her appearance insufficiently glamorous for your standards. The gathering crowd of passengers, airport officials, and crew members listened in stunned silence as Alexander methodically recounted every detail of Marcus's behavior. His calm recitation of facts somehow more devastating than any angry outburst could have been, while Marcus felt his professional reputation crumbling with each carefully chosen word. Alexander's tone never rose above conversational level, yet his words carried the weight of someone whose displeasure could end careers and destroy companies with a few strategic phone calls to the right people in positions of power throughout the global aviation industry. You treated my wife as though she were somehow beneath the standards of your company, when in fact her qualifications and experience exceed those of most flight attendants working in private aviation today, Alexander continued, his steely composure making it clear that this was not a negotiation, but rather a statement of facts that would have immediate and far-reaching consequences. Marcus finally found his voice, though it emerged as little more than a strangled whisper as he attempted to explain his actions in a way that might somehow mitigate the catastrophic damage he had done to his own future. Mr. Martinez, I had no idea. I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding, he stammered, his usual commanding presence completely absent as he faced the man whose influence could destroy everything he had spent decades building. If I had known who Sarah was, this never would have happened. I assure you that Blackwell Aviation values professionalism above all else. Alexander's expression remained perfectly neutral as he absorbed Marcus's desperate apology, though his next words made it clear that the damage was far beyond anything that simple remorse could repair. The problem, Mr. Blackwell, is not that you didn't know who my wife was, he said with the kind of devastating clarity that comes from someone who has never needed to raise his voice to command absolute attention. The problem is that you treated another human being with cruelty and disrespect, based solely on your superficial judgments about her appearance and worth. The three investors who had been considering a partnership with Blackwell Aviation began quietly discussing their immediate withdrawal from any potential business relationships, their whispered conversations making it clear that Marcus's behavior had revealed character flaws that made him unsuitable as a business partner, regardless of any financial considerations, while airport officials realized they were witnessing the complete professional destruction of someone who had built his career on the very exclusivity and arrogance that had just cost him everything. Sarah approached the gathering crowd with the same quiet dignity she had maintained throughout the morning's ordeal, her presence immediately drawing the attention of everyone in the terminal as she moved to stand beside her husband, their united front presenting a picture of strength and partnership that made Marcus's earlier treatment of her seem even more inexcusable in contrast. Alexander placed a gentle, protective hand on Sarah's shoulder as she joined him, his touch conveying both tenderness and unwavering support, while his eyes never left Marcus's face, which had now taken on the pale, desperate expression of someone watching his entire life's work crumble before his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander said, addressing the gathered crowd with the same commanding presence that had made him one of the most respected business leaders in the world, "I want you to meet my wife, Sarah Martinez, a woman whose professionalism, expertise, and dedication to passenger safety represent the very best of what the aviation industry should aspire to achieve." The applause that followed was spontaneous and heartfelt, led by Emma Rodriguez and the other crew members who had witnessed Sarah's grace under pressure, while passengers who had remained silent during her humiliation now stepped forward to express their regret for not speaking up when she needed their support. Abdullah Al-Mansouri approached Sarah directly, his diplomatic training evident in his respectful bearing as he offered a formal apology on behalf of everyone who had failed to defend her during Marcus's attack. "Madam, I deeply regret that we allowed you to face such treatment alone," he said, his accented English carrying genuine remorse. "Your dignity and professionalism throughout that ordeal were remarkable, and we should have stood up for what was right instead of remaining silent witnesses to injustice." Marcus watched this vindication unfold with growing desperation, his transformation from arrogant executive to pleading subordinate complete as he realized that his reputation in the aviation industry was now beyond salvage. His name would forever be associated with the kind of workplace bullying and discrimination that modern businesses work desperately to avoid. "Please, Mr. Martinez, surely we can resolve this situation," Marcus begged, his voice cracking with the strain of someone whose entire identity had been built on projecting strength and authority. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right, to show that Blackwell Aviation is committed to treating all employees with respect and dignity." Sarah looked at Marcus with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout his earlier assault on her character, her voice steady and clear as she addressed him directly for the first time since her return to the terminal. "Mr. Blackwell, I hope this experience helps you understand that every person deserves to be treated with basic human respect, regardless of their appearance or perceived status," she said, her words carrying the weight of someone who had never lost her dignity despite facing public humiliation. "Professionalism isn't about expensive clothes or impressive titles. It's about how we treat each other when we think no one important is watching." The gathered crowd absorbed her words with the reverent attention normally reserved for profound wisdom, while Marcus stood before her like a chastened child, receiving a lesson in humanity from someone whose character far exceeded his own. Within hours of the confrontation becoming public knowledge, Blackwell Aviation's board of directors convened an emergency meeting that resulted in immediate and sweeping policy changes designed to prevent any future incidents of workplace discrimination or employee mistreatment. Their urgent response, driven by both genuine concern for their corporate reputation and the very real possibility that Alexander Martinez's influence could destroy their company if they failed to take decisive action. Marcus found himself standing before microphones and cameras as news outlets picked up the story. His public apology broadcast across multiple networks as he announced comprehensive reforms to company culture, mandatory sensitivity training for all management personnel, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee to ensure that every employee would be treated with dignity and respect regardless of their position or appearance. The story spread through the aviation industry with the speed of wildfire, creating a ripple effect that forced airlines and charter companies across the globe to examine their own workplace cultures and employee treatment policies, with many discovering that they had been tolerating behaviors and attitudes that were no longer acceptable in a modern business environment. Sarah listened to Marcus's televised apology with the same grace she had shown throughout the entire ordeal, her response measured and thoughtful as she acknowledged his words while making it clear that true change would be demonstrated through actions rather than promises, her dignity intact despite everything she had endured. "I accept Mr. Blackwell's apology and his commitment to creating a better workplace environment for all aviation professionals," Sarah said during her own brief statement to the media, her voice carrying the quiet strength that had attracted Alexander to her 15 years earlier. "This incident was never about me personally, but about ensuring that every person in our industry is treated with the respect and professionalism they deserve." Alexander stood beside his wife during her statement, his presence serving as both support and a subtle reminder to the industry that powerful advocates were watching to ensure that the promised changes actually materialized into real improvements for working people throughout aviation. The immediate impact was felt across the industry as companies rushed to review their hiring practices, employee treatment policies, and management training programs, with many discovering that they had been unconsciously perpetuating systems that valued appearance over competence and status over character. Aviation trade publications devoted entire issues to discussions of workplace dignity and professional respect, while industry conferences began featuring sessions on creating inclusive environments that valued diverse perspectives and backgrounds rather than conformity to narrow standards of appearance or presentation. Marcus's personal transformation became a case study in business schools as an example of how quickly poor judgment and character flaws could destroy decades of professional achievement, while his genuine commitment to reform gradually earned him a measure of redemption as Blackwell Aviation became a model for progressive workplace policies. The incident sparked broader conversations about service industry culture and the treatment of workers across multiple sectors, with Sarah's dignified response serving as an inspiration for employees who had previously felt powerless to challenge unfair treatment from customers or supervisors, and the changes that followed her vindication created lasting improvements that extended far beyond the aviation industry itself. 2 years after that transformative day at the airport, The aviation industry had fundamentally changed in ways that few could have predicted, with Sarah Martinez's dignified response to public humiliation becoming the catalyst for a cultural revolution that improved working conditions and professional respect for service workers across multiple industries worldwide. Marcus Blackwell had undergone a genuine personal transformation that surprised even his harshest critics, his company now serving as a model for progressive workplace policies and employee dignity, with Marcus himself speaking regularly at industry conferences about the importance of treating every team member with respect, regardless of their role or appearance. Blackwell Aviation had not only survived the scandal, but had actually grown stronger, attracting top talent who were drawn to a company culture that valued character over superficial appearances. While Marcus's public journey from arrogant executive to thoughtful leader became required, reading and business ethics courses at universities around the world, Sarah continued her aviation career with renewed purpose, her experience having opened doors to consulting opportunities where she helped other companies develop policies that ensured fair treatment for all employees. Her quiet strength and professional expertise, now recognized throughout the industry as representing the highest standards of service excellence. The incident had sparked industry-wide reforms that extended far beyond aviation, with hotels, restaurants, retail establishments, and other service industries implementing new training programs designed to ensure that customers treated staff members with basic human dignity and respect. Professional organizations began recognizing the incident as a turning point in workplace culture, with annual awards established in Sarah's name to honor service workers who demonstrated exceptional professionalism in the face of difficult circumstances, while advocacy groups used her story to push for stronger protections against workplace harassment and discrimination. The changes reached international levels as governments and regulatory bodies incorporated new standards for workplace dignity into their oversight of service industries, with Sarah's calm response to injustice serving as a template for how organizations should handle complaints about employee mistreatment and customer abuse. What began as one woman's quiet refusal to accept unfair treatment had grown into a movement that transformed how society viewed and valued the contributions of service workers, proving that individual dignity and professional integrity could create changes that rippled across entire industries and cultures. The story serves as a powerful reminder that our true character is revealed not by our wealth, position, or appearance, but by how we treat others when we believe no one important is watching, and that every person deserves respect and dignity regardless of their role in life or their external circumstances. Sarah's experience teaches us that judging people based on superficial appearances blinds us to their true worth and potential contributions, while her husband's response demonstrates that those with power and influence have a responsibility to use their position to protect and defend those who may not have the resources to defend themselves. The lasting impact of their story continues to inspire people around the world to examine their own attitudes and behaviors, challenging everyone to treat others with the kindness and respect that creates a more just and compassionate society for all.